Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last in this series of Old Blue Talks. Before we start, please do put any questions during the talk into your Q&A at the bottom of the screen through the talk, and we will get to those at the end. And that's all from me. So we're coming live from Spain today. Please welcome Nigel Fleming, who will be speaking to you.
Good afternoon, or good morning to you in Housie, and thank you for attending this talk. This talk will take about 40 minutes, and I will take questions at the end. This is really a talk about the nature of reality, and this is the central question of all science and all art. I have been told that this talk may be too difficult for you, but I do not believe that. I've been told by my old CH chum, Matthew Oates, who has spoken to you before, that you are, as he calls it, brains on sticks, and I aim to give you a mental stretch. Too much of what I learned as a boy was milk slop, dumbed down nonsense that has taken years of self-education to dismantle and reinstall without dilution. I want to expose you to some unusual ideas, not things that you will find in your standard textbooks. This talk is pockmarked with rabbit holes, any of which you may fall down into and find yourself in a new and perplexing world, so beware. I was trained as a scientist, but this talk is not limited by the bounds of logic, reason, and the sciences, for there are many ways of knowing. Arthur Koestler, in his book, The Act of Creation, made a very big deal out of the idea that arts and sciences are two sides of the same coin, two ways of understanding the nature of reality. Keep both doors wide open. I shall very loosely use as a springboard the Dylan Thomas poem, The Fuse That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower, written when he was only 19 years old in 1933. In my view, it is one of the greatest poems ever written. In the backdrop of the talk, as you've already seen, will be images of a 10-foot high multimedia sculpture that I made dedicated to this very poem. You will see bits of it close up before you see the assembled whole, and there's an allegory there. The structure of my talk is as follows. Firstly, human Western cultures have suffered a number of major paradigm shifts of our way of looking at the world. Then I will lead you through the rationale that we all evolved not just from the apes or fish or reptiles, but from a single atom and its molecular descendants. I will suggest that we actually know very little about this primal central atom, or the funny stuff that we call energy that drives the universe. This in turn will lead to an appreciation that reality is not what it seems to be, and that our senses cannot be trusted. Next, I shall suggest that matter and energy at the quantum level are the biggest paradigm shifts of all. And to make matters worse, there may be a spectrum of life so that even rocks have a degree of consciousness. Then I will lead you to the great sausage machine called evolution and tell you about the phenomenon of emergence of mind. And finally, I will discuss how connectedness and cooperation drive evolution more than competition. Next slide, please, Gina. I hope that sounds acceptable. So now that you know where I'm going, I shall proceed. Humanity has suffered some mortal blows to its collective ego in the last 2,000 years, during which our history was dominated by stable religious worldviews. But in a series of radical paradigm shifts, this edifice supporting our collective thinking has been simply napalmed. Today, we are still reeling from the effects of eroding our very foundations of our basic assumptions about the world. First, there was Copernicus and Galileo, whose heresy was that Earth was not the center of the universe, with the sun circling the Earth. This unseated the special place for man in a God-created universe. Then Charles Darwin suggested that we were not created by God, but rather descended from apes, and before that from reptiles, and before that from fish, and finally from primitive marine algae, common pond slime. The creation story, which nobody questioned for 2,000 years, was suddenly adrift. Sigmund Freud rocked the apple cart by suggesting that our actions and thoughts were mostly subconscious, not rational or logical. Coming soon after the triumph of the age of reason and the success of science, this unseated man as the only rational animal. Then in 1924, the astronomer Edwin Hubble reluctantly proved the universe was much bigger than our Milky Way and was expanding rapidly, to the considerable disbelief of everyone, including Albert Einstein. Our little planet, it seems, was but a speck of dust in a remote backwater of a much, much bigger universe. And finally, Albert Einstein introduced the truly startling theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, which utterly undermined our common sense ideas of space and time, and upon which we are still choking today. As a consequence of these mortal blows to our collective ego, the stable, orderly, and hierarchical world described by the Bible and by Isaac Newton fell apart in very short order. And we have inherited the shards of this mess. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees, is my destroyer. Dylan Thomas tells you his secret in the first lines of his poem, The Force and the Green Fuse. Thomas posed the implicit question, the force. Is there an underlying commonality to the immense diversity of form that we see about us? For Thomas, the same force acted through the flower, trees, age, a rose, youth, rocks, blood, streams, a mountain, a pool, quicksand, wind, time, love, and ultimately death. From the animate to the inanimate, the one force governing essentially everything. From sheets of cells migrating in an embryo to migrating herds of wildebeest on the African Serengeti plains is the one universal driver. Thomas was not the first person to ask this question. The answer to this question is the holy grail of those seeking a theory of everything. Religion calls it God. But in Thomas's case, he proposed that such a universal force existed, but declined to further define it. Since the beginning of recorded thought, thinkers have felt that the force behind creation is a mathematical being whose hand is revealed in the truths of geometry. The Christian, the Muslim, the Buddhist religions all variously find numbers, geometry, and symmetry to be numinous elements. Plato, in the 5th century BC, famously said, God geometrizes continuously. Plato also inscribed over his Platonic Academy the following phrase, let none but geometers enter here. His message was crystal clear. Geometry is at the heart of philosophy and wisdom. Similarly, during the Gothic period, geometry was front and center in the religious architecture, and especially in the tracery windows. Galileo in the 16th century famously said that God was a geometer with his immortal quote, The universe is written in mathematical language, and the letters are triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, without which it is humanly impossible to comprehend a single word. Johannes Kepler, the 16th century astronomer, also believed the geometric underpinnings and proposed that polygons inscribed around circles might be the geometric basis of the cosmos. Implicit in all of these ideas is that there is a mathematical grid upon which all matter is pegged and whose order creates the constant patterns of nearly infinite diverse families of form in nature. Right. Underpinning reality, matter and energy, is a rigid geometric structure obeying immutable laws of physics. But other thinkers were more vague about the universal underpinnings of nature. The vitalists felt that life was irreducible due to an elan, a special, unmeasurable, irreducible, mystical force, where the whole was greater than the parts. Reductionists, on the other hand, believed that you could reduce life to its component parts and therefore reconstruct it from the parts. But nobody has put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I'm sorry, my screen keeps jumping. These conflicting views persist today. Clearly, Dylan Thomas was more of a vitalist in his sympathies. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. Although the vitalists, the alchemists, and the mystics were banished from mainstream science by scientific rationalism, the age of reason, and reductionists, they may have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Let us consider the most fundamental element of form in nature, energy and matter. Let us first consider energy. The late physics Nobel laureate Richard Feynman famously said, "It is important to realize that in physics today, we have no knowledge of what is energy." Imagine that. All of you who have labored through interminable texts on the thermodynamics and mechanics, you have no knowledge of energy. That is very, very troubling. The central pillar of physics, namely energy, is defined only by the work it can do, not by what it really is. Einstein indelibly carved into every mind on the planet E equals mc squared. By this, he meant that energy and matter are interchangeable, a shape-shifting pair which is sensitive to the observer. If Einstein is right, space-time is an inseparable entity, thus the trio of space, time, and energy are, it seems, deeply linked. The force that through the water drives the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. Now let us consider matter, or as I like to call it, stuff. Let us first start with the elephant in the room. 95% of the universe is undefined dark matter and dark energy, and the normal or visible so-called baryonic matter accounts for only 5% of the universe. This is all we can see, 5%. None of our most sophisticated instruments can yet measure dark energy and dark matter, but we are sure that such a thing exists. Of the 5% of stuff that we can actually see and measure, we are confident that over 75% of the universe is composed of one atom, of a proton plus one electron in the form of atomic hydrogen. We also believe that hydrogen was the first atom formed after the Big Bang when the universe was born, and from which all the other elements of the periodic table were built in the furnace of the stars. Thus, all visible matter that we know, or baryonic matter as we call it, arose from mother atom hydrogen. All matter and all life in its multitudinous forms are just congealed complexifications of hydrogen atoms. This applies to your cat, the chair, and to your mother. And from this simplest of atoms, incredibly, mind and consciousness arose. Think about that. Ambrose Bierce in 1909 in the Devil's Dictionary had this to say about mind, noun, mysterious form of matter secreted by the brain. Its chief activity consists in the endeavor to ascertain its own nature, the futility of the attempt being due to the fact that it has nothing but self to know itself with. Despite your hefty textbooks and obtuse problem sets, we really have a scant understanding of the most structurally simple of all atoms. We delude ourselves to think otherwise. Stuff, then, is much more complex than we can currently grasp. Next slide. Stuff is constantly being created and destroyed at a quantum level, with subatomic particles interchanging with one another, and energy, whatever that is, freely interchanging with matter, whatever that is. Think of a bubbling soup. That is matter in the ether. Matter, which is also energy, is essentially a shape-shifting probability distribution, constantly flickering, and when you observe it, the act of observing changes it. Go figure. Essentially, the stuff of the universe is much more like an amoeba under the microscope than a lump of clay. And I am dumb to mouth unto my veins, how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. Let us move on to how we perceive matter and energy as reality. All matter contains data or information, and it is being processed all the time. Information is physical. That one sentence has changed the lives of some physicists. You may have seen those long, narrow slit windows in castles that we use to fire arrows at invaders from. Well, such are our senses. We see but a tiny fraction of a percent of the spectrum of electromagnetic and gravitational force fields that surround us. Our five senses process this tiny fraction of a percent of the total ambient data for the brain. Otherwise, the organism would be completely overwhelmed by the full spectrum and amount of information that surrounds us. The senses, in turn, send electronic messages to the brain about data from the outside world, and the brain does a massive chunking and cutting and pasting process to create a digestible cartoon that keeps the organism, you, your cat, and your mother, out of the jaws of the monstrous Tyrannosaurus Rex. But this synthetic cartoon has nothing to do with reality. Nothing to do with reality. The image of Plato's cave is a gross understatement of the grand illusion that we take for reality. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand. The ropes, the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail. I want now to suggest to you that because quantum matter and energy have very strange properties, it should come as no surprise to you that reality also is strange, really strange. It was this, after all, that our friend Dylan Thomas was trying to explain. The flower, the trees, age, a rose, youth, rocks, blood, streams, a mountain, a pool, quicksand, wind, time, love, and ultimately death. We have reminded ourselves that of the 5% of the universe that is visible to us, as opposed to dark matter and dark energy, We filter this 5% again through a tiny fraction of a percent through our selective senses. And that constitutes our very, very narrow interpretation of reality. 0.001% of 5%, something in that order. Well, when Albert Einstein developed the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics starting in 1905, our collective grip on reality truly hit the skids. It is impossible to overstate how radical this was and still is. Prior to this, the stable, cold world of Isaac Newton silently circled itself under precise laws. But now, we think that time is but a persistent illusion and that the future may have already happened. We think that lengths are relative and can change, that pairs of particles can instantly communicate over infinite space and time, and that particles can also simultaneously be waves, and that matter is capable of being in two places at the same time. This is just the tip of the iceberg down the quantum rabbit hole. None of it makes any common sense. T.S. Eliot grappled with the ideas of relativity in his unforgettable four quartets. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility, only in a world of speculations. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Einstein called this the problem of now. None of this quantum world meets the sniff test. It is utterly confounding to the ordinary person, but we are repeatedly assured the world is quantum. Isaac Newton's tidy world of absolute time and absolute distance has been dissolved. The quantum world is Alice in Wonderland on buckets of LSD. Up is simultaneously down, black does not contradict white, contradictions comfortably exist. The rabbit hole has led us to a very, very strange place. And at the same time, astrophysics is predicting the existence of antimatter galaxies, strange matter stars, and fluxes of energy fields infusing everything. Newton's universe has gone belly up. Far from being a serene, dark, silent vacuum, space is a turbulent and very diverse place, materially and energetically. Take, for instance, a new form of matter in neutron star cores called strange quark matter. It's like an insatiable pathogen, infecting and converting normal matter into something altogether different. It can gobble up that little bit, that 5% of baryonic matter that makes up our reality. Or take, for instance, antimatter stars that have opposite electrical charges to normal baryonic matter and that annihilate normal baryonic matter on contact. There are proposed to be whole antimatter galaxies, or that antimatter may travel backwards in time. The universe, we are discovering, is full of immense, violent events, galaxies merging with black holes bigger than our Milky Way, devouring entire universes. To make things worse, it is probable that there are parallel universes and other dimensions whose mathematics and physical laws are nothing at all like ours. The erudite and white-haired emeritus professor at Oxford University, Roger Penrose, talks matter-of-factly about quantum matter existing in more than one place at a time and in parallel universes. These ideas are not coming from the barking fringe. They come from our mainstream, conservative, tenured professors, and that tends to make them more probable. Our sense of reality, which Dylan Thomas was trying to understand, has gone truly beyond the pale. Beam me up, Scotty, for any Star Trek fans, or keep calm and carry on for the Hitchhiker Guide fans. And I am dumb to tell the hanging man how oft my clay is made the hangman's line. Now that you know that stuff and energy and the whole kit and caboodle of the cosmos are pretty damn odd, here's a statement that should make you sit up straight. Everything evolves, and I mean everything, not just life, time, space, energy, matter. It is an inevitable consequence of the Big Bang theory. Darwin changed the paradigm of biology with the idea of evolution. Prior to this, our origins were never questioned. This was big. In 1973, the geneticist Theodorsky Dubansky famously wrote one of biology's most important statements. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. But I believe Dubansky's maxim applies to everything. The stars are born, age and die. Our sun will extinguish in 5 billion years' time. Energy and matter has evolved since the Big Bang, according to its own mythology. Everything evolves without exception. Even the laws of physics must evolve. Chemistry must change. Scientists have been curiously silent on this topic. It is too heretical. Remember, they would have burnt Galileo at the stake if he had not renounced the heliocentric universe. The consequences of this are very significant, for all things are in the process of becoming something else. Ovid, in Metamorphoses, book 15, had this to say: nothing perishes in this world, but things merely vary and change their form. To be born simply means that a thing begins to be something different than what it was before, and dying is ceasing to be that same thing. Yet, although nothing retains long the same image, the sum of the whole remains constant. Here is a memorable exemplar for you to visualize about change. The insect wing sprouted out of a modified leg and migrated from the lateral to the dorsal positions. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. You may be thinking that this Stephen King ride through Mordor is coming to a close. But buckle up, there is more. The rabbit hole of the quantum world is widely accepted. Matter is not what it seems to be and has completely wacky properties. To me, this absolutely permits the idea that everything made of matter or energy can have also completely wacky properties. According to Wikipedia, animism, from the Latin anima, breath, spirit, life, is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. It is also the vitalist elan. Ancient cultures have practiced animism all over the world. William Wordsworth, in his poem The Prelude, described an animated world. There is her mooring place. I left my bark and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. Over my thoughts there hung a darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees or sea or sky, no colors of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day and were a trouble to my dreams. Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge both believed that some form of life infused everything, every bit of matter. In other words, reality contained consciousness at all levels. Well, that may be fine for a bunch of poets who smoke recreational drugs, or for the woo-woo barking fringe. But recently, mainstream professors are seriously entertaining animist ideas, including that life may not be all or nothing, but exist on a spectrum. Of course, this makes great sense when considering the transition from chemistry to biology in early Earth. Until recently, the subject of consciousness was a hanging offense in the halls of serious science. But nowadays, august professors like Oxford's mathematics Nobel laureate Roger Penrose, Rudolph Tanzi, professor of neurology at Harvard Med School, and many other mainstream academics are now seriously proposing that rocks may be alive, the sun is an organism, and the entire universe is sentient. Poor Alice, tumbling down that rabbit hole. That poor Alice is us. And I am done to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven around the stars. Now we move on to consider Darwinian evolution, one version of the force that Dylan Thomas was grappling with, now a mainstream fact in all serious academia. The issue is how the immense diversity of life arose. Charles Darwin's most memorable lines were, "The more I study nature, the more I become impressed with ever-increasing force the conclusion that the contrivances and beautiful adaptations transcend in an incomparable degree the contrivances and adaptations which the most fertile mind of man could suggest with unlimited time at his disposal." This beautifully describes nature's unstoppable impulse to create diversity. Diversity at all costs could be a summary of biology, diversity or bust. Consider this. Life arose quickly on Earth and may still be doing so. 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth was formed, and only after 0.6 billion years, the first life formed, once the planet has stopped the period of heavy meteoric bombardment. That thread of germplasm was sustained by compulsive reproduction. Generate diversity, select and repeat. Generate diversity, select and repeat. Generate diversity, select and repeat. This is how evolution works. This is a manifestation of the force. Evolution works by generating endless random hybrids, by bolting unrelated systems together. It is no wonder there are so many examples of redundancy, duplication, inefficiency, alongside with simply breathtaking inventions. Here is something that you must never forget. 99% of all species that ever existed are extinct today. This breathtaking fact must be branded forever into your minds. Which leads me to this concept of the great sausage machine. Nature has had unlimited time with nearly unlimited life forms to experiment at random and generate the unlimited diversity that Darwin so eloquently described. But only less than 1% of nature's experiments survived. This appalling waste was a combination of astronomic and terrestrial catastrophes and hybrid organisms that were so badly bolted together that they simply fell apart. This squeaking menagerie of misfits and malformations somehow managed continuity. This level of experimental failure is a slither away from catastrophic failure. Most scientists, with this experimental failure rate, would give up. But nature has had unlimited throws of the dice in parallel over millions of species for billions of years. Brute statistics ensures survival even at those enormously long odds. This is the great sausage machine clanking away over the millennia. But now, nature has reached a point in time when two absolutely remarkable things have occurred. Firstly, it generated consciousness or mind. Second, it discovered how to use the raw intelligence of life to edit its own genome and thus modify its fate, namely, to unhitch itself from dumb chance and direct its own evolution. Bacteria have been editing genetic parasites out of their genomes for billions of years using CRISPR. To much fanfare, mankind applied its mind to discovering this in bacteria and is now applying it to its own genomes. We are on the brink of unhitching ourselves from stochastic fate and directing our own evolution. This is one of the times that evolution simply leapfrogs forward in a huge saltation. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. Next slide, Gina. We now consider the issue of interconnectedness and emergence. Tennyson described nature bred in tooth and claw, capturing the idea of competitive Darwinian evolution and the survival of the fittest. But Tennyson and Darwin had it wrong. Cooperation between species is now thought to be more important than competition. We owe our cellular control center, the nucleus, to an engulfed symbiotic virus. We owe our energy pump, the mitochondrion, to an engulfed symbiotic bacteria. And we owe the engine of plant photosynthesis, the chloroplast, to an engulfed symbiotic algae. Each of these cooperative species hybridizations led to an enormous jump forward in evolution. Cooperation led to more complex systems, from single-cell creatures to multicellular communities and the division of labor. When simple units form more complex systems like ants in an anthill or birds in a flock, the group intelligence is greater than any of the individual parts. When any simple systems combine to make more complex systems, from ants to weather systems, that higher complexity system often adopts quite surprising and unpredictable properties. This is called emergence and is one of the most powerful ideas in recent times. When mind or consciousness combine in a collective unconscious, especially when enabled by an electronic configuration like the internet, emergence is starting to happen. And one day, perhaps, the internet will wake up and lines of code act more like transposons and evolve into a new life form. That is a hanging offense unless you did not catch it. Pure heresy. Now it is time to wrap up this talk. The implicit question posed by Dylan Thomas, which is, what is the universal force behind reality of living and inanimate things, has engaged me enormously. But considering that my cerebral cortex is bolted over my reptilian hindbrain, and they don't often agree on much, least of all some mumbo jumbo from a philosopher's armchair, making sense of all this series of paradigm shifts has not been straightforward. The sense that I have made of all this so far, much communicated in this talk, includes the following ideas. The 5 blows to the human ego: Copernicus, Darwin, Freud, Hubble, Einstein. The force is mathematical, that God is a geometer, the invisible grid upon which all is pegged, that energy is a mysterious entity. Time may be an illusion, that matter is a quantum shapeshifter, that the mother of all was hydrogen, that all matter, all life are just complexifications of hydrogen atoms, that 95% of all matter is not known, that our senses lie and give us a false cartoon of reality, that the quantum world is Alice in Wonderland, that everything evolves, that mind is the ultimate product of nature, that mind is sentient. The great sausage machine, bolt-on evolution, has a 99% failure rate. And finally, that cooperation, not competition, rules evolution. Cooperation begets complexity, which begets emergence. These have been the key ideas of this talk. We can say that we have come a long way from Newton, and that nature in its animate and inanimate forms throughout the entire cosmos is being revealed as a confoundingly strange place where contradictions coexist, words fail, and mathematics falls apart. The universe is contemplating itself through us, complex hydrogen atoms looking at itself. Dylan Thomas lived while much of this was emerging, and I'd be very curious to make what he made of it today. But that, my friends, is a task that you carry forward with you into the future. It is your unfinished work. We have left Hobbit Town and are heading for the great unknown. I am afraid to rub it in and say that the pastoral world of Rupert Brooke's poem, The Old Vicarage, Grantchester, is now a very, very distant thing of a very, very distant past. Oh, yet stands the clock, church clock, at 10 to 3, and is the honey for tea? We can never go back. The genie is out of the bottle. All we can do is follow the breadcrumbs into the Minotaur's labyrinth in our search for the holy grail of the answer to life, the universe, and everything. But remember, if you put in the wrong question, you might only get the garbage answer 42 out. I hope that you have found this unconventional talk useful. Now, I'm happy to take any questions or comments, and thank you.
And we're back. Thank you very much, Nigel. That was great. I haven't got any open questions. Everyone's being shy. So if anyone missed it, if you have questions, could you pop them into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and I will fill them out.
Let me make a little comment about the sculpture that you were seeing as it went by in these strange close-up images that finally resulted in a final image. It was a conceptual sculpture based on this Dylan Thomas poem that absolutely inspired me. And doing a conceptual sculpture is a very difficult thing. How you convey ideas like he conveyed in a 3D form. But it contains the fractal, it contains the grid upon which everything is pegged. It contains the rose and the thorns. For me, that was a huge journey to go on for making that sculpture. Do we have questions, Gina?
Yeah, we've had one come in from Matthew.
Mr.
Says,
Matthew.
You say that art and science are two sides of the same coin. Fine, but what about the edge?
Ooh. I think Matthew might say that's religion. I have a feeling he might, but I think philosophy is on the edge. I think philosophy, mysticism, people who are inquiring into life in different different ways of inquiry. You know, science does it in the ways of rationality and reason. Art does it more intuitively. And I think the mystics would say that the way they see the world and perceive reality is through visions and through those sorts of things. We shouldn't discount them. I think they are serious. And you don't get that only by being Samuel Taylor Coleridge writing Kubla Khan under a little bit of funny stuff. You can get it. you can get it by other methods. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay. Any other questions? I have some comments. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
No. I mean, the only one I had is how do you go from being, I believe, as a professor at Harvard, is that right, to sculpting in Spain?
Well, that was actually quite easy. I went to Prague on the anniversary of Johannes Kepler's birthday, 400-year-old birthday, to stand on the Charles Bridge in Prague and catch a snowflake on my black coat and see a six-sided figure. And in his case, he went off and wrote a very important mathematical essay for his sponsor on that. In my case, I went to see a sculpture exhibition in the basement of a big castle. And in that basement was a sculpture of a human-sized figure of a man with a horse's head, stooping over a bowl of his own entrails. Well, I looked at that and I nearly fell over. And the next day I said to my wife, as we were standing in line at the Prague Museum of Art, I'm going to become a sculptor. I've never thought of it before. I've never occurred to me. I've never wanted to do it, but this is what I'm going to do. So I went on YouTube and I learned how to do it. Does that answer your question? Some things don't always happen in a linear way. So going to Matthew's question, that's the edge of the coin where some things come in different ways. For me, it was sort of a bit of a vision. It was a bolt of lightning.
Okay. And I don't know what's more frightening, actually, that you changed careers completely via YouTube, or that earlier you suggested the internet may come alive. It's a strange world.
I will likely be burnt at the stake for making a statement like the internet may come alive, because it is, for a scientist, it's a heretical statement. But if you consider that ordinary chemicals transformed into living things in the beginning of life, I don't see that as such a big jump. However, if you see me being burnt alive at the stake, please come with water.
I think we're all right. I think, well, in Spain and the UK, you're probably, I don't think they allow that anymore.
No, we had a few years of Spanish Inquisition. We got very good at it.
Fair enough. Keep your head down for a little while when this goes live, this recording.
I shall go very incognito.
Okay, so I've got no further questions. Just thanks. One of your contemporaries, Ray Day, has said he'd just like to say thank you and hello. It's been 50 years. So
very nice to see you.
Hello. So I think we're nearly on time anyway. We'll finish it there. If anyone does have any questions, I imagine you're probably just reeling from the fat face.
And I'm sure that Gina is more than happy to distribute a copy of my talk to anyone who's interested. Because if you haven't got a headache by now, you probably will be.
Absolutely. Just drop a line to the Old Blues email, which is where everything out of this office comes from. Just hit reply and let me know, and I can send that out. Other than that, I can only say thank you so much, Nigel, for giving up your time. I think you've left us with a lot to think about, especially me, and I've got it on paper. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your Thanksgiving tomorrow. You've brought some of Harvard back with you. And the recording of this and all of our talks will be available at the beginning of December. The news for that will be out to everyone. So once again, Nigel, thank you from me. Thank you from everyone that's watched today, and have a lovely day.
Enjoy your vacation. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.